permanently late. Or slow. Would you please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me, Senator Gendro?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is the Senate Education Committee, and we will open the hearing this morning with the Senate Bill 217. And the sponsor is
Senator Fenton. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10, which is a ton of towns. It's Alstead, Chesterfield, Dublin, Hancock, Harrisville, Keene, Marlborough, Nelson, Peterborough, Roxbury, Sullivan, Surrey, Swansea, Walpole, and Westmoreland. One of these days, I'm going to have those memorized, but for now, they're written down.
I'm impressed.
Thank you. I'm here today to talk to you about SB 217, establishing a rural and underserved area educator incentive program for higher education and making an appropriation therefor. Currently, there are around 104 rural school districts in New Hampshire, with many rural schools finding it hard to attract and retain teachers. SB 217 aims to address this issue by establishing an incentive program for educators to teach in rural and underserved areas, similar to a program for healthcare workers to work in the same areas. This idea originated from a commission to study the teacher shortage. We can all agree we have a problem, and that is we need more teachers. This program is very similar to what was passed in Idaho, where they are also feeling the teacher shortage. The incentive would include the repayment of all or part of the educator's outstanding educational loans if they stay employed with the same school or school district. This not only could help fill the much needed positions in rural and underserved areas, but also help our state mitigate the current teacher shortage we are experiencing. We have an obligation to ensure that any child, no matter the school district they attend, receives an adequate and fulfilling education. SB 217 takes the necessary steps to provide the school districts who need the most help with a tool to attract and retain teachers. I hope you will join me in finding new ways to provide the youngest granite staters with the structure and stability we all know they need by supporting SB 217. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members?
Well, you guys let me
Seeing
off the hook easy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm calling Megan Tuttle.
Good morning, Madam Chair, honorable members of the Senate Education Committee. For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle, and I'm here representing NEA New Hampshire and our more than 17,000 educators across the state, most of whom do work in the K-12 public schools. Here to testify in strong support of Senate Bill 217 that establishes a rural and underserved educator incentive program. Students deserve high-quality educator in each one of their classes, and as this committee is aware from the work of the Educator Shortage Committee, we have tremendous workforce shortage in our K-12 schools. This shortage did exist before the pandemic, but it's been made worse by the pandemic, and now's the time for New Hampshire to act and address this need through a variety of avenues. We see Senate Bill 217 as one of the tools in our tool belt to address this need. As Senator Fenton said, as a state, we're competing for workforce with our neighbors in our states around the country. We've seen an increase in states implementing programs like this, such as Idaho. They passed a similar law in their 2022 session, and its first year has already received 764 grant applications. The program has already begun to help out hundreds of applicants with incentive payments. Senate Bill 217 could mean up to $12,000 over a 4-year period for early educators who are trying to grapple with paying off loans while also trying to afford the ability to live in the community or around where they're teaching, either to buy a home or to pay rent. These are real dollars to those educators when you're talking about what are modest starting salaries for educators in our state. The median starting salary for a teacher with a bachelor's degree in New Hampshire was around $40,000, but that figure varies widely depending on the school district. As the lowest district, according to our 2021 data, was in the mid to low 30,000s. Starting salaries for those with a master's degree was slightly higher, but this underscores why a loan repayment program such as the one in Senate Bill 217 is so important. This says to prospective educator candidates that we value the work you do that you will be doing for our students. We want to help ease some of the barriers to achieving the steps necessary to enter the profession. In a recent survey conducted by NEA nationally, nearly half of all educators took out student loans to pay for college, and they still owe on average $58,700. And among those, 1 in 7 still owes more than $105,000. This isn't the first time New Hampshire has embarked on this path to meet a critical workforce need. Again, as Senator Fenton said, the Division of Public Health under the Department of Health and Human Services established the state loan repayment programs to provide funds to healthcare professionals working in areas of the state designated as being medically underserved and are willing to serve for a minimum of 3 years in such areas. By all measures, this has been a successful program. It can serve as evidence of the effectiveness of having this kind of aid available. And while the SLRP was able to recently take advantage of ARPA funding to significantly expand its reach, we think starting with this modest amount of state funding will be a solid start to a program that can one day grow if it proves effective. When I first started teaching in 1999, I was on the negotiations team for the Keene Education Association. And one of the ideas that I brought to the committee during negotiations that year was just this. It was a student loan repayment. And so we had up to $1,500 for any educator within their first 5 years of teaching. It lasted for a few years. It wasn't a ton of money, but it helped. And it was something that it was proposed. Both sides agreed to it. It went into effect. It was the only contract in the area that had something like that. So what it did was it really made Keene stand out. We can do that as New Hampshire. This is kind of the same thing, but on a a larger scale. We can get people who might be going to teach in Maine or Vermont or Massachusetts. If we have something like this, it could attract them a little better or a little more to New Hampshire. As I stated earlier, as states tackle the educator workforce shortage in significant ways, we don't want New Hampshire to be left behind without this as one of the tools in our tool belt. So most importantly for our students, we want to be able to say that we did everything we could to help strengthen the pipeline of future educators so they have the professionals they need to receive a world-class education in the Granite State. And I do have written testimony, and we have some other things we can hand in that talk about some other states with their student loan forgiveness programs. And if you want, I didn't make extra copies, but I'm more than willing to send them. It's we have the minimum salary in public school districts from 21-22 from the Department of Education, just to show the variety and the differences. There's a $20,000 difference between Rye and Errol. So just to show, it does vary so much. And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Lang.
Do you happen, or I'm not sure if Senator Fenton had a map showing what areas of New Hampshire qualify as a rural school district? Do we have that map somewhere?
Well, I'll hand that in for. Sorry. For the record, Brian Hawkins. What I will hand in is a map from the Division of Public Health, because that in the bill, that's the definition that we use for rural.
So there are two definitions, right?
Yes.
So there's either fewer than 20 students enrolled and per square mile within an encompassed school district's boundaries, and then there's also the public health. Do we know when we're done what percentage of the state that covers those two criteria?
Title I would include many of those communities. I brought the rural map to show you that. I'm happy to also send you the listing of Title I. I will say the way that Idaho prioritizes, they use a rubric for how to prioritize within those categories for their application. And so I can supply that for the committee as well.
My only question is, I want to see a land mass. What
Yes.
percentage of the state is covered by these two categories? That's all. See how much of the state is covered.
Yep.
Any other questions? Senator Prentice.
I actually have a question for Senator Fenton. You're not completely off the hook yet, just.
I'm outta here.
So hang on, the appropriation that you talked, that's the fiscal note, did the department bring this forward in the budget, or is this, additional? Did they bring this forward as one of their priorities? Department of Education
Are you asking me if the Department of Education brought this forward in their?
brought if they've asked for this funding already.
That
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have a comment that I'd like to make. This bill is the result of a very preliminary hearing of a study committee that we have on the teacher shortages. The committee has not finished its work. It will end in November. So I have a feeling there may be other things besides the salary structure that may affect the teacher retention and teacher interest. Any other things?
Did you say you had a list of salaries, lowest salaries that was going to be passed out?
Well, I have one that I can either give you this one. There's a couple notes on the top, or we can get more copies for you. But I'm
Thank you.
happy to hand it in. Yep.
Please.
Yes.
Any others? Thank you very much. The Honorable Jay Kahn.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Senator Ward, and good morning to committee members. You have a copy of testimony that I prepared for the committee on Senate Bill 217. And I'm here in support to speak in favor. I encourage you and your fellow senators to appropriate some funding where I believe it can have the greatest impact. I had the pleasure of chairing the committee on teacher shortages and recruitment that both the chair of the Senate Education Committee and the House Education Committee served on, along with a couple of other senators, representatives, excuse me, and Steve Appleby from the Department of Education. And yes, as your chair just indicated, there were some preliminary observations that could be made by the committee. And relative to this bill, there are chronic teacher shortage areas in the state of New Hampshire. And they most particularly are in science, mathematics, special education, and paraprofessionals, where there are over 1,000 vacancies at the start of the school year for paraprofessionals. In rural areas where there are smaller enrollments and fewer courses offered in those schools, teachers need multiple certifications, often temporary certifications, or advanced courses are shared. They've developed some sharing patterns for teachers with specialties like physics or chemistry, where teachers are shared across district or with community colleges. The second observation relative to this is that our teacher turnover rates are higher in lower paying districts and those that have lower student performance, because often those lower performing schools are right next to very high performing economically better off districts, and that's where teachers migrate. The low performance schools are correlated with economically disadvantaged school districts. The study on school financing made that positive correlation, which was quite high. The retirement rates have increased during the pandemic, and many states across the nation are using loan repayment incentives as a means to incentivize teacher education students to remain in their states. So Senate Bill 217 creates targeted allocations where these incentives can have the greatest impact. And the bill, as previously observed, would allow for up to $12,000 of repayment over a 4-year period, a period that I think the bill is structured to provide a period that's long enough for a person to become integrated into the culture of a school and the community in which they're working. So the criteria, and I'm glad to hear the interest of the committee in what those criteria are. These are adapted from other states that have rural populations. I'd love to see the maps too, to see how these work out. But I want to say that they have application beyond just this bill. for any of us who've served with Representative Ladd in the legislature for years, we know that being from Woodsville, we've heard him say on many occasions that the matter of rural ought to be a part of school funding formulas. He particularly brings this up relative to transportation funding, but it can also be applied to teacher shortage areas. And we do need a replacement measure for economically disadvantaged school districts. Free and reduced lunch just is not going to make it, hasn't made it over the last couple of years, probably won't in the future. But economically disadvantaged schools can be based on the eligibility for Title I funding under the federal acts. And that is money that the Department of Education does track through from the federal government to the school districts. So we've got a good alternative measure, and it's applied in this bill. So the criteria used in 217 are useful beyond this bill. The legislature in the last two biennial budgets has directed funds to economically disadvantaged school districts through either disparity grants or in this current biennium, extraordinary need grants. And 217 is another way to assist these districts. A December 2022 Education Commission of the States report, and that's a national organization, cited that 37 states have at least one scholarship program aimed at teachers who commit to teach in underserved schools or subject shortage areas. And 25 states have a loan forgiveness program for the same purpose as in this bill. So the point is, this is what New Hampshire is competing with when we try to recruit teachers to our state or retain them. So I read last night a blurb, real quick, flashed from the union leader, and it said the governor will be recommending today more funding for public schools. Senate Bill 217 provides a vehicle for the legislature to direct additional funding in a manner that can have the highest impact on student performance. And that is, after all, what we're here for, is to try to influence that. A qualified teacher is the best way to help students learn. Many vacant positions are being filled by conditionally licensed teachers. We can make a difference. Lower the disadvantages that students face in poorer or rural school districts by passing Senate Bill 217. I'd be glad to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee members? Senator Lang?
So I'm putting on my old school board hat, and I negotiated 2 teachers' unions contracts, of which professional improvement and paying reimbursement for education were part of the union contract. Is the state stepping in and going to cause some problems with unions by inserting this language required by every district that currently isn't in their contract language?
These are dollars that, first off, I'd be curious the amount of money that you're putting towards this. I think that by establishing something that's progressive, meaning from $1,500 to $4,500, it is suggesting a way that the dollars ought to be allocated, no question about it. But there's a benefit to this state as well as to a local district to have high quality teachers. So I think, the state puts in 1/3 of the dollars to public funding of schools. This is a very small allowance here to try to encourage incentives. And we're following the lead of every other, of half the states in the nation. So there's got to be something right in this. And I trust that you'll find the right modicum of how to introduce this so that schools can be and districts can be supported in their efforts to try to attract teachers with the proper qualifications to teach the content that is needed by our students.
Follow up?
So again, so in the case of Newfound School District, in their latest contract, I pulled off the BOE website, it's $1,300 a year. They already give the teachers for professional development, those kind of programs to be able to do things. So I guess again, I'm a little concerned the fact that we're taking items that are negotiated in the contracts and now we're going to modify them outside of the contract union negotiation provisions.
Well, I'm glad thank you. Glad you asked that question again, because professional development is quite different than loan repayment. Professional development is, aimed at trying to have teachers get that second degree, whether that's in a second content area, or it's in special education, or it's in a master's degree program, so that they can teach running start courses. Professional development is not loan repayment. Loan repayment is a debt that a student has already incurred prior to their employment, and this is a repayment of that obligation. It's an incentive. I mean, it's a way that a person who already is facing the costs of having attended school for 4 years, acquired the credentials they need for employment, and rewarding them with something that they're obligated to pay back, that the district is going to assist them with.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody in the audience who likes to say something about this particular bill, SB 217? The next bill is Senate Bill 218. And I guess we have Senator Fenton
back.
introducing it.
A bad habit.
Yep.
If you all are ready, I am Senator Donovan Fenton for the record. I represent District 10. I told you all the towns, so I don't need to do them again. I'm here today to talk to you about SB 218, establishing an early educator professional development grant. 218 aims to address our state's teacher shortage as well. As we all know, teachers are an integral part of every child's life, which is why we should enable our state with every tool possible to ensure our children have the best and brightest teaching them in the classroom. This bill establishes an early educator professional grant. This grant aims to increase teacher retention, increase teacher support efforts, and increase the likelihood of success for New Hampshire's educators by incentivizing teachers to stay in this field. This bill is based on another recommendation from the commission to study our teacher shortage. So this is not necessarily new. We know that the first couple years of a new educator's career are crucial to foster their drive to make teaching a lifelong career. Too often lately, we're seeing teachers enter the field and leave it a year or two later, which is why we need to provide school districts with the resources to support and mentor new teachers. I hope you will join me in supporting SB 218 to help our teachers find a home in New Hampshire teaching where they feel supported and valued. Thank you.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Gendro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Donovan. I come from, of course, District 1, where we have a lot of rural schools up there, and we have also a lot of very high qualified teachers. My concern is just throwing more money at them or throwing more incentives financially at them. Will that really create qualified teachers, which will then in turn give quality education? I'll give you an example, and I will not use the exact words that the student said to this wonderful teacher. And this teacher said to me, "You can only be told so many times to go yourself." They left. Now, I'm thinking if we had thrown more money at that teacher, would that have kept the teacher there? I don't think so. So I'm thinking we've got, and just like Senator Ward had said, that I think there are a lot of factors in this. You know, schools are losing students. At Littleton School District alone, 50 years ago, there were 215 graduates. This past year, 23. So I think we're losing students. There are different alternatives. But my concern would be throwing more money at them. Is that really solving the problem or solving the challenge?
No, thank you for the question, Senator. I think, I believe in the old adage, you pay for what you get. And I think we just learned that, a starting salary for an educator is $40,000. That's not a lot of money today. That's tough to make a living on today. And when we are entrusting them with our most valuable resource, which is our children, I think it's absolutely necessary to pay them more so that we can attract the best and the brightest and the qualified, and also help the current teachers that are there doing it on such a low amount of money.
Follow-up?
So I guess, and I agree with you. I agree that we do need to help the teachers out as much as we can, but I think that's only one aspect of it. I just feel like just throwing more money at them isn't really taking care of the root issue. That's that from my perspective. That's all.
No, thank you for the follow-up. I don't think it's, throwing money at them. I think it's supporting them. And by supporting them, we're supporting our schools and we're supporting our students.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I almost made it away with no questions.
Megan Tuttle.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I like to bring guests with me. Still Megan Tuttle, still president for NEA New Hampshire, for the record, representing more than 17,000 educators across the state. Here to testify in support of Senate Bill 218 that establishes an early educator professional development grant. Again, we've said this before, we have a crisis in New Hampshire and across the country for education. Many ideas have been discussed in the committee and are still being discussed. As Senator Ward said, the committee is not done, which I'm very happy to hear. There's still going to be more that comes out of it, more research, more study, etc. I do want to make a quick point. We don't really have necessarily a shortage of potential educators. We really have a shortage of educators coming in and staying in the profession. So that pipeline is really where a lot of this lies for what we think. The talent is out there to have good teachers in the classroom, but not having the support for that talent is going to be a hindrance to attracting and retaining that talent. Historically, if teachers are going to leave the profession, they're going to leave within the first 5 years. So how do we combat that? We give them support, we encourage them, we treat them like the professionals that they are. This bill helps with that by requiring that local professional development master plans articulate the professional learning goals and the plans to help support and mentor early educators. The legislation would provide matching grants to local school districts which utilize their own local funds to fulfill these sort of plans. So the educator themselves is not getting the money, it's going towards helping to create the plans that are going to support them. We see this bill as part of a multi-prong effect to attract and retain the best teachers we can in New Hampshire. So I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. And when I was in the classroom and we had open house, I always had a handout for the parents and the students that came in that was just that. It was literally a three-legged stool. And we talked about that. I talked to the parents and the students that it took all three parts of that stool in order for the stool to stand up. It took the students coming to school and doing their part. It took the parents doing their part at home, working with the school, the educators, etc. And it took me as the teacher to make sure everything was working together to make sure that stool didn't fall. Currently, this committee has heard about two legs of that stool to strengthen the educator pipeline. They heard about the student teaching stipend, Senate Bill 140. We literally just heard about student loan forgiveness, Senate Bill 217. And we see Senate Bill 218 as that third leg that's going to help ensure those early educators have the best chance to succeed in the classroom. If we can't support the teachers we have in New Hampshire and the teachers coming into New Hampshire, then we're not going to be able to fill the positions that are still unfilled across the state. And there are numerous positions still unfilled across the state. It's better than the beginning of the school year, but for teacher positions, there's still a few hundred not being filled at this point as of January, February. I'm happy to be joined today by Irv Richardson, our coordinator of public education school support, who's going to share some of his expertise in the importance of supporting mentoring programs for early educators. And I do urge this committee to find Senate Bill 218 ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning, and As Megan said, my name is Irv Richardson. I'm the coordinator for public education and school support. And it's a little bit odd being here because 17 years ago, I was hired by the Department of Education to be the support and evaluator for their grant for their mentoring program, Induction with Mentoring, new teacher hiring, and the Future Educators Academy. So bringing that experience, I think we all know from personal experience when we take on a new role, whether it's I'm now a senator or I'm now a teacher or I'm now an administrator, it helps to have support from people who are new in that environment who can explain this is how we negotiate it. That's what this bill does. It provides support for educators who are new to the profession, new to a district, or new to a role. In my personal experience, I was a teacher in Freeport, Maine, who was then promoted to become a principal. So same building, very different role. So I note that this bill says educators, so certainly it's our belief that everybody who's new to a role or the profession should get support for that, whether you're a superintendent, a principal, a teacher, or an education support professionals, that everybody needs support when they start in that role. And this bill, I'm in favor of, would have districts articulate for someone who is new, what support do we offer them? And it wouldn't be a grant to that particular educator, but it would help allay the funds and provide funds for the professional development for those educators who are new to the profession or new to a role. And I would note that currently we have a contract with a group in Colorado, our state does, for $469,000 to provide virtual mentoring to rural teachers. And I think that's a great step in the right direction, but I would rather see that money spent here developing the social capital of educators in New Hampshire, because we know that the more people feel supported and a sense of efficacy in their jobs, the greater likelihood that they're staying. And finally, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with the superintendent 16 years ago. He was pushing back on starting the mentoring program, which is still running in that district. But he said, Irv, what if we support them and train them to do a good job here in our district and they leave? And all I could think of to say was, well, what if you don't and they stay? And this bill is about providing support to have people learn to do the job well and staying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? None. Thank you very much. Do we have anybody in the audience who likes to speak on Senate Bill 2118? Seeing none. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 218. Almost.
Thank you. See that? When I present bills, I go fast and I get it done,
If possible, could you find a seat to sit down? We don't like to have people standing up. The next bill is Senate Bill 219, and we'll hear from the sponsor, Senator Murphy.
Morning, Madam Chair. Keith Murphy, representing the people of Manchester, Hooksett, Candia, and Raymond, and Goffstown. So this bill is an attempt to deal with an evolving problem. We all want to fairly compensate teachers. We all want good quality public schools. The problem is that in the last 20 years, from 2001 to 2021, the cost per pupil in our state has increased 77%. Salaries in that time are up 1%. The balance has gone to administration. The number of non-teaching staff in that 20-year period is up 80%. The number of teaching staff is up 23%. We have superintendents paid up to $178,000 in our state. We have assistant superintendents being paid up to $136,000 in our state. Meanwhile, one town in my district starts teachers at under $38,000. And I would hope we can all agree that's ridiculous. These are college-educated, committed professionals teaching our children, making $38,000 a year. So the bill before you is an attempt to deal with that situation by essentially capping the salaries of certain administrative positions in relation to a salary floor for teachers. The amendment that's been submitted is to deal with the fact that the bill as originally drafted was up against the filing deadline, and so I signed off on the bill pending redraft. It was at the deadline, so the amendment corrects some typos and issues with the original bill. So I would ask that you look at the amendment instead of the bill as it may have originally been passed out. There are people behind me to speak to the bill. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I would promise you you'll get a better answer from people behind me.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, do you have, okay.
Sorry, Senator, I'm not going to let you off the hot seat. So I guess my one question is around the definition of salary floor. And I think your definition is 4 times the per pupil cost. Is that per that district or the state average?
The 4 times is the state average, I believe, as is defined.
So
But
in this
it-
case, the current state average in this last fiscal year was just over 20 grand. So we're talking about an $80,000 teacher salary.
No, and let me be clear, this only applies to districts that are large enough to have positions such as assistant superintendents and professionals, diversity professionals. So it wouldn't apply to
Thank
every
you.
district.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'm calling it in Hewitt.
All right, red means on, right? I guess so. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Ian Hewitt, I'm General Counsel at Cornerstone, appearing in support of Senator Murphy's amendment. I should qualify that and say I believe this amendment that you have before you also has a small, although very significant, potentially OLS difficulty on lines 14 and 17. Effective date of this subdivision actually should be changed to date of the passage of this act to honor the intent of this amendment. I could talk more about that if you would like, but I did want to point out everything I'll say now is subject to that qualification. There are multiple ways to describe this bill as amended, but I think maybe the simplest and most accessible would be to say that under this bill as amended, if you're a community in New Hampshire, you may pay teachers as little or as much as you would like, subject to existing law. You may have as few or as many administrators as you would like. You could still have 100 administrators if that's what you want. But what you cannot do is prioritize having a large administration over teacher pay. That's maybe the most apparent thing Senator Murphy's bill would do, but it also does something that is equally, if not more important, which is address the equivalent of what's sometimes called Washington Monument Syndrome in New Hampshire education. This is a term that refers to the fact that anytime a government agency wants to maximize its budget, its incentive will always be to prioritize its most extraneous spending and deprioritize its most visible spending. So for example, this term, Washington Monument Syndrome, comes from 1969 when the US Congress attempted to decrease the budget of the National Park Service. They decided it had gotten too high and they wanted to trim it down somewhat. What Congress had in mind is they thought the National Park Service then would do things like decrease the salaries of its top officials. But instead, the very first cut that was made by the National Park Service was they started closing down the Washington Monument and the Grand Canyon at peak visitor times. So they put the lowest priority on the most visible spending item. And likewise, if a taxpayer in New Hampshire is deciding what school taxes should be, the teacher we've been hearing about this morning making less than a starting salary at McDonald's is a lot more visible than the assistant superintendent making $140,000 a year, or this newer class of diversity professionals making $150,000 a year. So we think this could go a long way to explaining why, as Senator Murphy said, over 20 years, we've had cost per pupil spending go up 77%, And miraculously, none of that money ever seems to translate to any increase in teacher pay in New Hampshire, while we do have a lot more administration. So not only is it bad in and of itself to prioritize large administration over teacher pay, but taxpayers are really stuck in a cycle of what our New Hampshire State Board of Education member Ryan Terrell has called moral coercion, where this cycle basically guarantees that taxes and spending are going to keep increasing and increasing, and that's not actually going to translate to the increased teacher pay that taxpayers might intend. I think it might be helpful if I concluded here by giving an example of a specific district and talking briefly about what this looks like in practice. So one example of a district that would be impacted by this bill as amended is Plymouth. And I'm picking on the Plymouth School District only because it's smaller and there's some nice round numbers we can look at. But this is a district that would, under this bill as amended, it would have to either cut down on its administration or increase its teacher pay. And in Plymouth, there are 4 administrators that we know about that make between them $500,000 together. And then there are 40 teachers who make an average of $70,000, which comes out to around $3 million. So that's 4 people versus 40 people. And it's not hard to see, if we had a small fraction of that administration, like we would have had 20 years ago, you would have thousands more dollars to pay per teacher, and that much more money could go to making sure we attract and retain the best possible teachers to teach students. So that the question addressed by this bill is, if we were going to increase per pupil spending 77% over 20 years, shouldn't we at least have paid teachers to teach students first and then created these palatial administrations if that's for some reason what we wanted to do? And that's the question addressed by this bill, and that's what Senator Murphy's bill would do. I'd be happy to answer any legal questions about the bill or practical questions.
Where did Tim go? Any questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ward. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I just have one question for you. In picking on the administrative side and discussing that, you've picked out specifically diversity professionals and been very specific about that salary. Is there a reason why we're targeting diversity professionals? Is it because it's a newer role? Is it because of the level of pay that you've observed? Is there another comparable type position within school administrations that you want to expand upon? Because it feels really targeted, and also Plymouth is in my district, so I'd like to know more about this.
It is. It's targeted directly at assistant superintendents and full-time diversity professionals. Both of them make comparable salaries, so that's one reason they kind of go into the same group together. But I mean, probably the most on the head reason that those 2 positions are singled out is that if you instead had a bill that balanced overall non-teacher pay spending versus teacher pay spending, probably what would happen is you would get a lot of people talking about the fact that some non-teacher pay is related in some ways to certain federal laws and requirements. Like paraprofessionals, for example, there might be federal laws and regulations that relate to how they're paid. Whereas if you single out these couple of positions, which are very highly paid administrators, they're the second highest paid positions together after superintendents in the New Hampshire school system, there really isn't any argument that any kind of federal law or regulation requires these positions. And what we would want to avoid is having school districts go to their taxpayers and say, okay, federal law actually requires that we keep our current administrator or non-teacher spending, so therefore you must increase our teacher pay. We want to present a choice to school districts, and here there is a clear choice, because if they attempted to make that argument under this bill as amended, the other side could come back and say, well, no, there is no federal law or requirement. It's just these 2 positions that are the highest paid positions after superintendents. And that does relate to Senator Lang's question, which I should briefly clarify there. The cost per pupil is based on the specific school district. There are references in the legislative findings that I think Senator Murphy was referring to about average per pupil spending, but for the purposes of the prohibition and the requirement in this bill, the per pupil spending in each district, the salary floor in each district would be based on that specific district's circumstances. Cost per pupil refers to the cost per pupil within a school district, line 1, page 2.
Senator Fenton.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I have a question on the amendment, line 24 and 25. Can you define what a privileged bureaucratic class is?
I believe you're talking about the legislative findings.
Yes, correct.
So that doesn't have an exhaustive definition because it's just a value judgment in the findings. So it would be that would be a finding of the legislature that there is this class of people that's making very large salaries that is privileged relative to teachers that are making, literally less than a starting salary at Walmart. And I think the value judgment that legislative finding reflects would be that it's inappropriate to have people making that salary at a time when we have teachers being paid these egregiously low salaries. That whether or not we should have these high paid administrative positions and have this many of them, at least the teacher pay should have been prioritized first before those administrative positions.
Follow up?
Follow up.
So in your opinion, do you believe that's the right verbiage for something like this, a privileged bureaucratic class?
If you wanted to propose different verbiage, there might be something else that would reflect the same general idea, but I do think that reflects a kind of systemic privileging of these positions, these bureaucratic positions, when the primary purpose of education should be to pay the teachers that will teach students and attract and retain the best teachers. And even if it's appropriate to have these administrative positions, they shouldn't be prioritized so heavily above teacher pay.
Follow up?
Thank you. No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Dan Innes.
Good morning, everyone. Dan Innes from Bradford, New Hampshire, representing District 7. And I'll be brief this morning. I generally support this bill, and I've been in higher education for 30 years. My former wife has taught high school for 20 years. I have a son who teaches high school, now in his 4th year, a daughter who teaches a microbiology lab at UNH, and a son who's a professor at Roger Williams University. I've been around this block. I have seen administrative costs skyrocket at universities and in high schools, and I've talked to all of my family members prior to testifying today. My youngest son says he feels all the administration works against them and isn't really there to help them and puts up roadblocks, and that there are just too darn many of them. And he's new at this, and he already sees that. He hasn't watched it transpire. And I think the real issue is this. When people pay taxes or tuition for their children to learn, they want them to learn, and they want those dollars to go into instruction and into the classroom. And we've seen a tremendous imbalance develop from K to 12 all the way up through our universities in the last 10 to 20 years. And we watch as administrative costs climb dramatically. I've heard it here in these buildings, how UNH's administrative costs are going up much more quickly than anything else. Faculty are getting 2 to 4% raises even in this high inflation time. Meanwhile, the administration continues to grow almost by double digits every year. So I think it's important that we take a look at this and we try to find a better balance and get the dollars into the classroom to help the students. Senator Prentice, you had a question about the diversity officer as being sort of almost a litmus test for this. I understand your point, and there might be a better way to do it. I support what the bill's trying to do. I'm not sure that's the best representation of, an indication that administration has gone too far. Perhaps there's some sort of balance of a proportion of expenses for administration versus faculty and so on. But I do encourage the committee to please give this strong consideration, find a way to help us to encourage K-12 schools to really put the money where it matters, and that's in the classroom helping the students. If there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Lang.
Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. I guess my question is still around, similar to the other bill we had, which was around union contracts.
Okay.
How does this not violate a union contract by setting salaries, which are a direct union-related activity?
it would have to be a part of the collective bargaining process, right? Think my experience at the university where I've served on the teams on both sides. Remember, I was an administrator. I'm recovering. But can you ask that question again?
So again, one of the purviews of a collective bargaining
Yeah.
is salaries and benefits, right? And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
other professional related things.
Yeah,
And here we're automatically setting salaries and benefits of certain teachers or organizations.
Yeah,
And my
no,
question is, how does that not
understand.
impinge? And we have a PLARB argument here.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that. I can't answer that. I would say if this came down to the university, we would handle it through collective bargaining and might go into some sort of special session with the union. So it can be done. I can't speak to K to 12 because I don't know quite how those negotiations are structured. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Megan Tuttle.
Good morning. I think I'm alone this time. Maybe not, but again, still Megan Tuttle, still President NEA New Hampshire, representing 17,000 educators across the state, primarily K to 12. We are here in opposition to Senate Bill 219. This bill really is using the very real issue of raising teacher salaries to oppose the existence of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and their coordinators. The DEIJ coordinators have made extraordinary contributions to school districts where they exist. They're a very important component of helping create safe and affirming environments for our ever diversifying student body in New Hampshire. During the teacher shortage committee, there was testimony heard from 3 such coordinators about the crucial role they play in their districts. We're strongly urging you not to entertain this legislation. Seems to be more of political commentary than any kind of a proposal. If you really want to raise teacher salaries across the state, that's one thing, but this bill is targeting about 8 or so districts, and so that really doesn't solve the issue or do anything for raising the teacher salaries across the state. You did ask the question, if I could try to answer a little bit, if you don't mind, about the collective bargaining. In our view, this does put something, that should be negotiated. We negotiate salaries K to 12 with the management, school boards, superintendents, et cetera, and this is kind of superimposing something on that, which kind of goes around the negotiations process, we believe.
Questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you. So, but my question is, I think that the thrust of this bill is the fact that our administrative costs are out of control and the teacher salaries are too low. When we're hiring administrators at 178,000, at the same time in that same district, we're hiring teachers at 37,000. How do we fix that?
Thank you for the question. I would love to negotiate better salaries for the teachers across the state. I don't have an answer for that, to be honest. We do think that, teacher salaries should be raised. I mean, this is something we've been advocating for a long time. We advocate every time we go to bargaining, every time we go to the local town hall, every time we're in a gymnasium on Saturday mornings in March, every time budget committee hearings are coming before us. We firmly believe teacher salaries should be higher to represent and reflect the work they do, professionals they are, et cetera. We have our process through the negotiating process. We don't have a say in the administrators' salaries necessarily.
Follow up?
But again, don't you think that the whole point of this discussion in this bill is the fact that let's focus on the teachers in front of the students and not the administration?
Thank you for the question. It could be, but this bill only targets about 8 districts across the state. We represent 230 locals across the state. So there's I think a larger pool of, if we're going to really focus on raising teacher salaries, then I think we need to be doing it across the state, not just targeted a few locals.
Senator Gendro?
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. The administrative salaries are set by the school boards, aren't they?
Thank you. I believe so. Yep. Yes.
So that could be the rub there. So the unions, they're not under the union contract, so the school board set the salaries in order to attract high quality administrators, which then puts them in a higher category.
Yes.
So we'd have to talk to each school board.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
yes.
you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Honorable Jay Khan. You don't want to speak? Okay.
I don't think he meant to sign it.
There's this thing here to speak. Deborah House. Morning.
Yeah, good morning, Senator Ward and members of the Senate Education Committee. I am president of the American Federation of Teachers New Hampshire, and I'm pleased to address you this morning. I am here to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 219. As nice as it would be to have a floor under the salary for public school teachers, this bill would not have would not do what the title says it would. It really is about the salary of administrators in only 8 districts in the state. So it would not overall raise the salaries of educators in most of the districts in the state. We would really like to see teachers compensated in recognition of their many years of college education that they need to get before they become teachers, and in recognition of all the hard work they do and continuing education they get as they go through their career. And this bill doesn't do it. It focuses only on those districts that have more than one assistant superintendent or have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice professional. And as I said, that is 8 districts that have one or the other. Most of those districts already pay above the state average. If the state wants to, toss in the funding for raising the salaries in those districts, that might be a different conversation, but I don't think that's included in here. If we want to talk about the disparity between the funding of administration versus the funding of teacher salary, again, that is a local issue, and that is up to your individual school boards. And unfortunately, that is not something that we negotiate either AFT or NEA. As much as we might like to, it is not in our purview. And simply putting a floor under the starting salary of teachers would be disruptive to existing contracts. I think I saw Senator Prentice indicating that we would view that as, if you want to put a floor under the contract, then we would argue you need to raise the whole thing. If that's how you want to go about it, everything would go up from that floor, but that would be our position on it, if you're asking. And if you're trying to remove administrators, saying that they are not valuable, I would argue that doesn't remove the work they do. My experience has been in the city of Nashua, and they have pared back on some administrators over the past, I've taught there for 18 years. They've cut back on some levels of administration. And a lot of the work that was done by curriculum developers in administration has fallen on some combination of the assistant administrators and the teachers. So the work gets divided up, some of it falling right back on the classroom teachers. So when you do stuff like is envisioned in here, it may have unintended consequences and actually take more time away from the teachers you're trying to give the ability to concentrate on the students more. So for all those reasons, we are opposing this bill. Even though it sounds lovely to have a salary floor and pay teachers more, it's not going to do the job. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you
Okay.
very much. We have Sarah Robinson.
Hello, Madam Chair, Committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Sarah Robinson. I'm the Education Justice Campaign Director for Granite State Progress. I'm a graduate of New Hampshire Public Schools, and I'm also a parent of 2 elementary school age children who attend our local public school, and I am here in opposition to SB 219. This is a bill that specifically targets DEIJ directors within 4 districts in our state and ultimately only 8 districts in total. Using teacher pay as a way to encourage the elimination of other essential roles in our public schools is an attempt to advance the banned concepts law that is already wreaking havoc on our public schools. Teachers across our state deserve competitive wages, but this bill is not actually about valuing the teaching profession. If that were the case, the bill's sponsors would have instead crafted legislation that solves our public education funding issues and free communities to increase teacher salaries on their own. Equity work is essential to providing an honest education in our public schools, which is a resource that is overwhelmingly supported by Granite Staters. The roles these individuals play is nuanced and time-consuming. It is the responsibility of all of us to advance that work together with our DEIJ directors leading the way. SB 219 is insulting to educators, administrators, equity professionals, and the students and communities that support and rely on their work. So please, I ask you to vote SB 219 as inexpedient to legislate. Thank you.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Lang.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess you had made a comment about public education funding and and fixing it. And I guess my question revolves around the idea of focusing on direct student contact professionals versus administrative professionals. And don't you think the state has an interest in recognizing that the focus should be on direct contact professionals, not administrative professionals?
I appreciate the question. I think what this bill unfortunately overlooks is the nuanced ways in which districts are put together in order to fully benefit the students that participate in being educated there. I mean, you wouldn't, like C-suites exist in businesses to help manage the work of that business for growth. I would say the same thing of administrative staff, that there are specific talents and resources that each of those individuals bring to the management of, for these 8 districts are very large. Concord, for example, has, you know, like 1,400 students. That's a large community to manage with hundreds of educators. And not every assistant superintendent, I believe, does the exact same job. They're all skilled professionals with specific roles that they play within that community. And all of that is decided by local electeds. You know, communities are making decisions about what happens in their schools. This circumvents that decision making.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, folks.
Anybody else in the audience who likes to testify on this bill? Okay. Then I have an announcement. There are several people who would like to testify on this bill. They wanted the bill postponed, but since it was already posted, we couldn't do that. So I will recess this bill and continue the hearing next Tuesday. So we have one more left, and that is 216.
He meant to write.
So he just did it too much.
Yeah. Wait, Peter. Jay Con meant to write it
Is
first instead of.
is Senator Carson going to do this?
Okay. Yeah, he's in opposition.
Okay, Senator Carson is the sponsor for this bill. I don't see her here. The what? Oh, okay.
We can ride along.
Right.
Doing good.
Exact some bills afterwards. Has she responded? Because I can have somebody else introduce
What
it.
number is it? I can.
216.
You want me to introduce it?
Well. There she is. Oh, okay. Senator Carson?
Lou, you want to come up here? Here. You can sit there? Okay. Nope, we're outside. Sorry, we just have to do a little moving around this morning, a little adjusting.
We have Senate Bill 216, and Senator Carson will introduce it.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to Senate Education members. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure of introducing Senate Bill 216, making changes to the requirements for civics education and establishing the New Hampshire Civics Education Commission. Madam Chair, this bill is the result of a lot of work, a lot of teachers, and New Hampshire civics that are interested, are passionate about ensuring that our children learn about our government. And it's not only learning about our government, but it's how our government works and how they can access it, which I think is probably one of the most important things that we can teach children today. So many people just really don't understand how our government works. And I can speak, Madam Chair, with the voice of experience because I teach at the Community College in Nashua, and I see students coming out of our public school system that really have not been taught about civics and how important it is. Some don't even know that there's 3 branches of government. And I had that conversation at a gas station in my district yesterday morning, and people not understanding that each branch and what each branch does and the Constitution. And I just finished a section on the New Hampshire Constitution. Some students didn't even know that we had our own Constitution. And I think it's vitally important that we educate students on these issues because, as I tell my students, government determines how you live your life every day. And it is extremely important that you learn how to access it, that your voice is heard. And so that's why, Madam Chair, I, when asked, decided to bring this bill forward. This is a win-win for the state of New Hampshire and for our citizens, that we get a good government. And how do we do that? We do that by educating our citizens on how to access government, what it is, what it does, so they can stand up when they think something's great, but what's even more important, when they can stand up when it's something they don't think it's great for the state of New Hampshire. There's a couple of things that a couple of points I'd like to make. Civics is a nonpartisan subject. It is truly nonpartisan. We're not talking about educating students as Republicans or educating students about Democrats. We're talking about educating students about our government, how it works. Yes, we have a 2-party system. And I think it's important that our students understand we have a 2-party system. And what I know what I do with my students when we talk about political parties, I have them go to the websites. I have them go to the NHGOP website. I have them go to the Democratic Party website and read the party platforms. And so they can learn what each party is about, so they can make an educated decision about which party they support. I don't see anything wrong with that, Madam Chair, because we want our students to develop critical thinking skills. And our job is to give them those tools. We need to have more of a focus on civics in the elementary schools, integrated with other subjects. I think that is very important. All of us are here, the committee, myself and our colleague, Senator D'Alessandro, who's with us this morning. We all stand out at the polls when it's election time, and we talk to our voters. How many of you see parents coming in with young children and the children coming out with stickers that say, "I voted"? How do we continue to keep that level of enthusiasm as they get older? We do that by teaching them about civics and how important it is that they participate. This bill also seeks to add an additional half year in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. Again, vitally important that these children get that foundation that once they get to high school, they can really start to build on. And the last point I'd really like to make, Madam Chair, is that this bill really comes from the teachers, from the unions, and from our superintendents. This really is an education bill where everyone needs to participate. So at this point, I will conclude my testimony, Madam Chair. My colleague here, Senator D'Alessandro, as we know, has been the champion of getting civics in our schools, and he has a few words he'd like to say as well. Thank
Senator
you, Madam Chair.
D'Alessandro, welcome.
Well, thank you. I will, before I make comments on the questions for the distinguished prime sponsor of the bill, Senator Carson, who I'm
Does anybody have any
most
questions?
appreciative of what
Senator
she did.
Gendro has a question for Senator
Thank you,
Carson.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator
Good morning,
Carson.
Senator.
Good morning. The question I have is, when did we stop teaching civics?
I think it's gradually happened over time. I think as a lot of more emphasis has been placed on science and technology, in my opinion, a lot of the liberal arts have been lost. English, history, and civics, quite frankly. Civics used to be part of history. And when you have to make a decision between history and an additional computer class, people have to make a choice. And oftentimes they do that for the sciences because of the emphasis on science. But we can't forget about English and literature and history and civics. They're all vitally important for a well-rounded education.
Thank you. So it's follow-up? So it's kind of been like a slow fade, and now we realize that we've got to get back to it.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for your
Now,
time.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Did you have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me, and distinguished members of the committee. For the record, I'm Senator Lou D'Alessandro. I represent District 20, Manchester Wards 2, 3, 4, 10, 11, and 12. And I come to you as a civics teacher. I taught civics at Kennett High School in Conway, New Hampshire, 50 years ago. I taught it at Bishop Bradley High School. Some of my students, the Secretary of State, the former Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, was my student from began in the 9th grade. I taught civics, I taught history to him. There are a number of other distinguished New Hampshire citizens who had my civics class. Alex Ray had my civics class. Didn't do as well as Bill Gardner did. Financially, he's done very well, but had Gene Chandler, Speaker of the House. I had him in class. So I've had a myriad of students. I worked to get a civics bill passed for years before the Senate and the House. We finally got it passed, I think, 2 or 3 bienniums ago. Why is civics so important? Basic education. People should know about their government, should know what is available to them, how they participate, why government works and why government doesn't work. We've failed to do that. We've adjusted the curriculum. We offer so many options that we strayed away from the basics. And civics is a very basic situation. It's a very, very basic course. And it stays with you for the rest of your life because you're going to participate for the rest of your life, hopefully. And as a result of the changes made in this bill by Senator Carson, we'll have a broader sense of how we learn, where we learn. And all of these are fundamental if this process is to continue. We've witnessed over the years a breakdown in our society. Polarization has existed because people just don't know. They have no idea. They think that force is a way to create change. Well, it isn't a way to create change. Fundamental belief creates change. Action creates change. Participation creates change. All of these factors are learned through the education process. Education produces communication. Communication produces the inability to interact. And that's what we need. We need interaction amongst people. Republicans, Democrats, independents. Why won't people join a party? Because they don't understand the worth of a party. Why have so many people chosen to become independents? It's the largest block of voters in the country as we speak. So the very, very basics of our society, the basic reason why we have a democracy, a creative democracy, and a lasting democracy. And believe me when I tell you this, democracy is in peril. It's in peril all over the world. Look at what's happened in many, many countries that were democratic that are now turning to the autocratic system. And I think it's a highly, highly sensitive issue, but it's the most important issue. Our students should be well educated. They should learn civics. They should stay with the program. And as I said, as a civics teacher, I taught state and local governments at St. Anselm College for a number of years. And the more people know, the better the decision-making process will be, the more active they'll be in the society, and the better citizens they will be. So with that, Madam Chair, I conclude my testimony. Thank you very much for your attentiveness. And again, I thank Senator Carson for sponsoring this piece of legislation. Oh, I knocked him dead. I knocked him dead. Just knocked it out of the park. Fed sold 14 cars while I was talking. You know, the kid, 16 cars. You know, that's part of the civic process. You know, he was out there working the crowd. Nothing wrong with that. We appreciate that. You're welcome. Thank you.
The last name
Jacqueline.
looks like C-O-E, last name.
Jacqueline. I only
So-
know because my wife's name is Jacqueline. That's it,
Okay.
she spelled it.
So you Jacqueline Coe? Okay.
I'm honored to speak here.
Could you turn on the mic, please? Thank you.
I'm honored to speak here in support of SB 216, which calls for an increased focus on civics education. Civics education plays a critical role in helping students develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to become informed and engaged citizens. It teaches students about the rights and responsibilities that they have and the structure, function of government, and the importance of participation in the democratic process. One of the highlights of my teaching career was each year I would bring a whole cohort of a busload of students for youth and government. And my students would sit in these chairs, and I watched as over those days they discovered the spark and the power of participatory government. And then they brought that back to Kearsarge and then Bow when I was in Bow. When I first started teaching, social studies was included within the accountability testing. So I think to your earlier question, when it was no longer a tested subject, I noticed the focus and attention paid to it decreased significantly. There was always some other priority, especially with the elementary and middle school within the decision-making process at the schools. The passage of SB 216 would serve to reestablish the importance specifically of civics education. By increasing the focus on civics in the elementary and middle school particularly, we can help ensure that our students are well prepared to participate in the political process. I also appreciate that SB 216 maintains local control, that it will enable me and my staff and the district and school board to determine how best to incorporate civics education within their schools. We can foster a culture of increased civic engagement and help to ensure that our students have the knowledge and skills they need to be active and engaged citizens. In conclusion, I support SB 216 as an investment in our students and in the future of democracy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thanks. Next one, we have Susan Guild. last name is in the big G on the, what is your last name?
Gamache.
Gamache.
Gamache. Well, thank you for allowing me to talk today about something I'm very passionate about. I'll give you a little background. I'm currently an adjunct professor at New England College, where I teach methods of teaching social studies and introduction to education, as well as supervising student teachers, all the social studies future student teachers, and other teachers as well. My background is I taught in Concord at Runlet Middle School for 27 years, primarily 7th and 8th grade, but also 6th. I had an opportunity to teach in elementary school, and I started in high school in Manchester. So I'm in a unique situation where I've gone from elementary to higher ed. And so, first of all, obviously civics is essential to the success of a democracy. Sitting here right now, this is what we're doing. We are acting out on that amazing privilege that so many people in the world have no opportunity to do. I can tell you, as Senator Carson, I can echo her sentiments that first thing I did in my class this semester was have my students take a middle school civics test. And although I didn't embarrass them by having them share their results, the only ones who really had success were the 2 future social studies teachers. Most of my students are elementary teachers. So what I want to address is the need to not, having a civics class in high school is wonderful, and that's what I taught in Manchester at Memorial High School. But in isolation, it makes no sense. We know that the spiraling curriculum that we build on our schema, on our background knowledge, and everything starts in elementary. And that's where the engagement and the excitement is at its top. All children, I observed 2nd graders and 5th graders yesterday, understand the concept of fairness. And this is where we begin. We begin with self. We go to family. We go to community and state and national. And we build on those concepts and ideals in more complex ways as we go up. So by the time our students get to high school and they're taking that civics course, the foundations should be there. And they should be able to relate those big concepts that are repeated time and time again. It's essential to, I agree with Senator D'Alessandro, to the survival of a democracy. Without understanding our rights and responsibilities as citizens, the structure of our government, the way we make decisions, and the impact we have as individuals on our own lives and on the lives of others, really, what's the sense of learning anything else? And I will tell you that in elementary schools, ever since No Child Left Behind, where social studies has not been included, sometimes they get an hour of social studies a week. It's very heavy in math and in reading and writing, of course, which is totally incorporated in social studies. I learned how to write nonfiction and read nonfiction, which is the bulk of what all of us do, in my social studies classes. So in conclusion, I could not support this bill more, and thank you for hearing
Thank you.
me.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Martha Madsen?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Martha Madsen, and I direct New Hampshire Civics. New Hampshire Civics leads a coalition called the New Hampshire Civic Learning Coalition, and it includes really any and all educators who care about this issue. So we've been working together for about 1.5 years, and this is the first thing we've really this opinion really gelled around this particular bill. I was really surprised at how much consensus there was. Um, teachers, unions, administrators, the Bar Foundation is in favor of this bill. And you'll hear from Elizabeth DeBrule of the New Hampshire Historical Society, who supports this bill. And it's been so encouraging to see the bipartisan support also. It's been really exciting. So thank you for hearing this. The More Time on Civics bill, SB 216, originated from a committee of educators called the New Hampshire Civic Learning Coalition, and is the result of more than a year and a half of work examining and deliberating about policies and practices that most benefit students' learning and would make the most sense for New Hampshire. I will be giving you each a list of the members of the coalition, so you'll have a list of all those names. But as I've said, the organizations that have come out formally in support of this bill are my organization, New Hampshire Civics, the New Hampshire Bar Foundation, NEA New Hampshire, AFT New Hampshire, Carl Ladd and Jerry Frew from the from the NHSAA, the League of Women Voters, New Hampshire, and this to me is really important, the New Hampshire Council for Social Studies. The board was unanimous in support of this, and the New Hampshire Historical Society. There are so many reasons to support this bill, and you will hear them from different people today, but I will just give you a few of the ones that mean the most to me. I find this very hopeful. Civics education has the potential to unite our country and our state and to help us move on together to solve problems in spite of differences. In a poll taken by Dr. Frank Lutz for Civics Now, it was found that 56% of Democrats and 56% of Republicans thought civics education was the best way to unify our country and move forward. So I feel that this is a positive step and a very hopeful step. Second, we know, as we've heard, that civics and social studies in general has been marginalized. After the enactment of No Child Left Behind, 44% of school districts have reduced the amount of time spent on social studies in elementary school. And we all know how important foundational learning is. Like if you don't understand yourself and your family and your community, it's really hard to then understand what a state is or a nation is. So the high school teachers are really needing to go back to very basic things. And I have a couple of letters from two high school teachers who have expressed support for this because they would like to go deeper and because they're starting at this very foundational level in high school. And it's not too late, but it's almost too late to really engage and excite. And as Sue was saying, introduce that spiraling curriculum that starts really early with basic things like why do we need rules? How do we make decisions? How do we handle when we disagree? If you don't teach those things really early, it's very tough to then, introduce everything in a half year in high school. Third, preparation for civic life was the primary purpose for establishing public schools in the United States. We know that students who receive effective and high-quality civics education are more likely to vote, 4 times more likely to volunteer and work with neighbors on community issues, and are more confident in their ability to speak publicly and communicate with elected officials. So as I said, I have a folder for each of you. Being a teacher, I have materials that I'd like to share with you. I'd also like to make a note of a change that we are requesting, and Senator Khan will be more detailed about this piece. But, and we understand that both Senator Carson and Senator D'Alessandro are okay with this shift. The role of the commission, as we saw it, was to assess the implementation process, to identify and share best practices in civics education, and to identify and share professional development and curricular resources, and identify next steps, right? And we feel that this role can easily be filled by our coalition, by the 40 people in the coalition. We are the, the veterans of the earlier version of this bill. And we feel that the independent nature of the group gives some real credibility. So we are going to propose, and as I said, Senator Khan will give you more details about it, that we delete paragraphs 3 and 4. And finally, it's been really gratifying to observe the consensus for this bill and among this very diverse group of educators and legislators, and to see the bipartisan support for that the bill has earned. And it's been fun to do civics for civics. So thank you for your time and for the opportunity to talk. Any
Questions from the committee members? Senator Gendro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Martha, thank you for being here to testify. As you were speaking too, you were talking about, the teachers and they're excited. I'm sure there are a lot of teachers that are excited to be teaching this. How many generations, though, of teachers do we have in the system now that were never taught civics? So that they would
Right.
have to go back and kind of get that fire in their belly
Yeah,
to teach
I think
it.
that's particularly important for elementary school teachers because I don't think a lot, my understanding is that they don't have many of them, all the background knowledge in government that a social studies teacher would have in middle or high school. So that's why the coalition is ready to begin training people. We understand that if kindergarten teachers are able to teach coding because they were trained how to teach coding, then they can be taught how to integrate civics into what they already do. They don't have more time, but they can integrate it into how they manage their classrooms, into certainly literacy by selecting certain books, into music, into art. There are so many ways to integrate civics day to day, and you'll hear from an elementary teacher today who will explain how she does that. But I think you're right. Some teachers need that confidence, just like they needed confidence to learn how to code, right? and we're prepared to pool our resources and make sure they're up to speed.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Lang.
Thank you. So I'm going to focus on the second half of this bill, which is actually the establishment of the commission.
Right.
And I guess my
Right.
question is, I'm reading through all the list of people that are on this commission.
Yeah.
There's not one parent, just not a professional, just a plain old parent on this
Yeah.
commission at all. Don't you think that's important to have, like, somebody who's not a lawyer or a union
Mhm.
representative or a teacher or an historical society, but just a plain
Yeah.
parent who has no only interest is in their child, not
Yes.
anything
we,
else?
We have, we actually looked high and low for parents to join us. We found Carrie Neal, who is a parent and also a school board member. So she sort of represents parents in our coalition. But also, we're expecting that the governor might appoint, there are some appointments made to that. But I guess I also want to say that we're backing up from that commission idea. We started off with a legislative commission idea. And then we learned that the legislative commission would need to be at least half legislators. And then through the process, we didn't understand that it was going to go toward the Department of Education. We would really like this to be independent, an independent commission. So that's why we're asking to just take that whole part out and to make sure that our coalition is like our coalition is the informal commission, if that makes sense.
What's that? Any other questions? I guess not. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm getting to the point that in the interest of time, there are quite a few of you who still like to testify. If something has already been said, or you have something that's different, can you just cut it down to 3 minutes per person so we get through this? I would really appreciate it. Haley Joy Goodwin?
Hi, my name is Haley Goodwin, and I am an 8th grade social studies teacher. I have taught grades 6 through 12, and I'm here today to talk about why this is such an important issue. So, teaching 14-year-olds, I'd like you to keep that age group in mind as I go through this list of things that my students come to me not knowing. My students do not say in school, know or understand the Pledge of Allegiance. They believe that the country of Mexico is located in the state of Wisconsin. They don't know the name of their own state or where to find it on a map, believe that Thomas Jefferson was an explorer, cannot correctly identify the name of the president or vice president of the United States, think that there are 36 states and stars on the flag, cannot tell you where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans are, believe that their town is actually New Hampshire, have never heard why we celebrate the 4th of July, can tell you what a Republican and Democrat is, and to them, that is the enemy or a stupid person, depending on which party they believe in. I had a conversation with my students just this past week, and a student, we'll call her Sally, was asked the question, are you proud to be an American? It was just a general conversation we were having together. And she said she's not proud to be an American because she's French Canadian. I said, oh, were you born in Canada? She says, no, I was born in New Hampshire, thinking maybe she had dual citizenship. Were your parents born in Canada? No, they were born in New Hampshire too, but I'm French Canadian. As a 14-year-old child, she did not understand that she was a citizen of the United States. The next problem that we had in this conversation was that she was not open into understanding or having a conversation with me about why she was an American citizen. Her mind was completely shut off, and I feel like civics education is more than just the understanding of content. Civics is the skill, application, and the learning of morals and core virtues. Teachers are seeing the consequences of the lack of civics every day. Student behaviors are on the rise, as you have mentioned earlier. Kids are becoming meaner and more self-centered. Students are still receiving an education on values, but not from parents or from school. They learn it on the internet, where their heroes and role models are people like Andrew Tate, who show them that you need to be loud and aggressive in order to win. Students are trying to become winners and losers. They are shouting out W and L in my classroom rather than trying to figure out ways to work together. In my conversation on Are You Proud to Be an American, I learned that either they are not proud to be American or they're scared to be. They are afraid that showing love for their country means that they are hateful, racist bigots. This makes me sad and scared for our country. We need to remember that there is a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Expressing love, hope, and appreciation for the red, white, and blue does not and should not lead our students to think hateful thoughts of one another. We need to teach our students that the red, white, and blue is what unifies us. This bill does not tell teachers what lessons to teach, how to teach it, or how long to teach civics in each lesson. However, it is a declaration that civics is important and we need to have an emphasis on civic virtues. This December, my fiance and I are getting married, and we're beyond excited to get married and start our lives together, but there is also a fear, as both of us are educators and see these future generations coming up, of what our lives will look like when we get to be retired. We see a lack of understanding in the classroom, and we don't know what that's going to look like in the future if we don't do something now. I miss the days of past generations where current generations looked to future ones in hope that they could make a difference in this country. By supporting this bill and voting in favor, you are saying that you want to participate in raising up a better and kinder generation that supports civic values. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, I guess you did a good job. Thank you very much. Deborah House.
Good morning. My name is Deborah House. I am president of the American Federation of Teachers, New Hampshire, and I'm going to speak in favor of this bill. I'm not going to repeat all the wonderful things you've heard from the other presenters before me. I am going to say that we all know that teaching civics is very important and that it should start early. I will say that when I was approached by members of the coalition about this bill, I was a bit skeptical at first because I heard my elementary school colleagues saying, but when do we do it? There are so many things on our plate, when do we find time to do it? So the biggest thing that they had to persuade me of is that it could be done within all the other things we need to do. So that was one thing we talked about, was how to fit this in. And I think someone else was also going to present how you can talk about civics at an elementary school level in an integrated fashion. As you're talking about classroom rules, every classroom in morning meeting talks about how we're going to organize ourselves today, how we make rules so that we can get along and get our work done and have our learning time and still respect each other and not distract other students while they're doing their work. So those are somewhat basic civic lessons that teachers are teaching every day without specifically calling it civics. Part of what we're trying to do is to make sure that teachers are making students aware that this is a foundational skill they are learning, and it ties into how we get along with each other in our schools, in our communities, and in our state, in our country. So we support the idea behind this bill, and we also support in the middle school that it can be taught as part of other social studies classes, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate half year. It can be units they're already doing, and then a standalone class in high school, because it is a very important topic to prepare students to engage in as citizens in our society at all levels. And that is all I'm going to present. If you have questions,
Thank
I
you.
will try and answer them, but I believe we've had much
Any-
better presentations already.
Any
Thank you.
questions from the committee members? Eventually, at the
Mhm.
very end. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you very much. Anne Marie Banfield.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Anne Marie Banfield. I'm a parental rights advocate in New Hampshire focused on academic excellence in education. But today I come here opposed to HB 216. I think we heard from many speakers today that I do not disagree with. I think they made a case for why we need a quality civics education in New Hampshire. So that I do agree with. I think what we have is an illiteracy problem, and I think that was expressed by many of the speakers here today. And if this just focused on literacy, I would support it. So I think we can agree that a rigorous civics education is needed now more than ever. That's what academic standards can do. High quality academic standards in civics and a good standardized test would focus public schools back on civics. And that's what we don't have. The reason they're focused on math and English is because we have a standardized test. It focuses schools on the academic content. Civics standards should be included certainly in the social studies standards, and everyone should take part in offering feedback to the State Board of Education when the draft is presented, because they've been working on the social studies standards for a while now. You improve civics by improving those standards and making sure that the tests are of quality too. Unfortunately, there are civics organizations that take a highly partisan action civics approach to civics education, and we see that in this bill. At the same time, iCivics promotes video game civics. Again, what we need is high quality standards and tests, and we've moved away from testing kids in this subject. That's why we're not seeing quality civics taught in schools. What they're getting is they're getting a lot of action civics. So teachers are having kids do a lot without understanding what they're even doing. The workforce training model used in K-12 education degrades academic quality in an effort to focus on soft skills. This leaves students less prepared to succeed in college or the workforce. So we see that emphasis on the soft skills in this bill. My objections are directed primarily at B, for instance, civic skills and acquisitions of skills. C, civics dispositions and acquisitions of dispositions. C, civics behaviors and development of behaviors. This dilutes the academic content that we're all here saying we need. When you focus your classroom on action versus academic content, you're not going to fix the problem. Soft skills required in B demand more focus on skills and less focus on knowledge or civics literacy. What does that look like in the classroom? I'll give you an example. Several years ago, a parent, a homeschool parent who had homeschooled her son K-8, put her son in Pinkerton Academy. In math class, he was constantly working with a partner on math problems, on math projects, And she called me, she said, why are they working on projects all the time? If I homeschooled him, we would be getting through this book. But because he has to go and work on a project every week, now he's falling further and further behind. And I said, well, that's competency-based education. It's skills-focused. It's not academic-focused. So they're trying to teach him to learn teamwork. Great skills to have, but you can see the dilution of academic content in that scenario. So C&D appoints the state as the arbitrator who will instill values, dispositions, and behaviors in our children. Included in this is a focus on civics action. There are two federal civics bills that have come under immense scrutiny for these reasons. Stanley Kurtz has written extensively on the glaring problems with Civics Learning Act 2021 and Civics Secures Democracy Act, both at the federal level. The Civics Learning Act provides $30 million in grant funds for grassroots activism involving innovative and evidence-based civics learning and teaching programs. These programs will include hands-on civic engagement activities like lobbying and protesting, online and video game-based learning, service learning in partnership with radical activist organizations, and participation in student governments. While most civics courses begin in middle and high school, the Civics Learning Act will introduce political activism to elementary school students, so you can see where this is going. We've seen some of this play out in schools already. In Baltimore, students were used, I emphasize here, to push vaccines. Baltimore's public school system created a youth ambassador program to increase COVID vaccine confidence and uptake among young people. And I will send you a copy of this testimony with the links to all this information. In Manchester, I think this is really important. Several years ago, former Assistant Superintendent David Ryan can be seen in the video that I will send you, explaining to the Board of School Committee that civics education in Manchester will include becoming a lesson in community organizing. So children would be learning how to write elected officials about police brutality. This is middle school children who need to be learning the academic content, but they're going to be spending time, according to the assistant superintendent, on civics action instead, community organizing. The Nellie Mae organization, who has funded the New Hampshire Department of Education and many schools in our state, distributes grants to states and schools and advertises that their goal is to create community organizers. That's where our civics education has gone. It's not that it's disappeared, it's just that it's shifted. This bill does not help in any way to improve civics education in New Hampshire. The way you attack this problem is through academic standards and testing. We need high quality academic standards and tests. Children should not be used as someone's mule for civic action. Our schools should provide the best quality education, and if students decide to engage in any political activity, that is their choice. While we certainly appreciate active citizens, the role of public education is to educate, not create community organizers. So in section 1C, you'll see under A, opportunities and responsibilities for civic involvement, skills to effectively participate in civic affairs. So there's more in this bill that continue to push that. Senator Lang, you brought up why there's no parent on this. That was part of my question too. I've been doing this for what, 20 years? Not once have I been asked to sit on any of these commissions. Where are some critical thinkers? Where are some people who will bring this kind of thought, this kind of information to a commission like this? It's the same people. Where's the New Hampshire School Districts Governance Association on this list? They're nowhere to be found. They're never asked. I'm never asked. And I've been doing this for many, many years. This is just another commission set up.
Excuse me, are you almost done with your
Yes, I
testimony?
will finish this up in probably
Okay,
2
good.
minutes or less.
Okay.
Some of these organizations are highly partisan. The New Hampshire School Boards Association is included, but again, not the School Districts Governance Association. This bill is attempting to do what the federal government wants to do in all state. This is coming from the Biden administration. Sell an important issue to parents, civics education, without any evidence that any of this will improve literacy in civics. This will bloat the bureaucracy in an effort to put more pressure on schools to create community organizers. So for this reasons, I urge you to ITL if unless you would like to offer up amendments, because I don't think that this is going to help our kids in terms of literacy. And that's what I think we all in this room probably can agree upon.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Do we hold off? Very quick one.
Yep. So just one clarification, just to let you know, as I was the sponsor last year of the high school civics bill that established this. And so those two last points you made about the opportunities and responsibilities for civic involvement and skills that effective participate in civic affairs, that's already law. So that's not new law. That was part of the original bill back in the day, back when we filed it 2 years ago and had it approved, Senate Bill, House Bill 320. But my question for you is Section 1A. I assume you agree with that, about establishing an elementary, a middle school, and a high school program for civics, that you agree that by breaking out and having that, that will better help our students to slowly engage in on knowledge-based
Yes.
implications. And I assume you also agree that, and I think you said this, in the commission, having parents involved.
Yes.
If this was to move forward, that it's absolutely imperative that parents be
Yes.
involved.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Caitlin Roca. If you could keep your testimony to 3 minutes, I would really appreciate it. There's still a lot of people who have signed up, so.
I understand. Hi, so my name's Caitlin Rocca. I am a current UNH freshman, and I graduated from Exeter High School this last spring. So just coming out of my K through 12 education, I feel like I can offer more of a student's perspective on this bill. Really, I have been fortunate enough to have family around me to really encourage me to be involved with government and my community. And personally, I love government and law, so it's kind of been my thing growing up. But really, I didn't get the depth of civics that I thought I was. And it wasn't actually until I shadowed under Senator Ward my sophomore year of high school that I was shocked at how much civics plays a part in our daily lives. I was able to sit in on meetings about boat docks and teachers' background checks, and they play such a minute but really substantial part of people's daily lives. And students aren't realizing that they do have a voice, they need to use it, and that the government is there to help us and protect us as long as we play a part in it. We're crucial to that component. So really, that opened my eyes, and I joined the New Hampshire Civic Learning Coalition because civics is obviously a vital part. I feel like we can all agree on that. And as part of the coalition, I want to talk a little bit about the process. As a student on there, I was listened to. As a junior going into my senior year of high school, I had adults listening to me and my perspective. In the meetings, we heard positions from both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, to try and see where people were coming from. This bill is bipartisan to really the best ability that we can and what we could come up with. Furthermore, the students would not only learn fundamental aspects of our government, like the purpose and the number of our branches, and we would learn foundational documents such as the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but we'd also learn the skills that civics requires to be an engaged and involved citizen. And it's those two components that are crucial to having a well-rounded and good civics education for K through 12. We need K through 12 because from kindergarten, we need those fundamental skills. Civics is a skill. Being a good citizen isn't something you just learn in a day or in a half-year course in high school. Granted, the half-year course in high school, people loved. I would talk to my peers, and it was one of the classes they were most excited about. And I've talked to kids in 5th grade about the importance of civics and how they can get involved. The room was electric. They wanted to learn how they can get involved. They were excited. The teachers emailed me afterwards saying that they kept asking questions. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to learn more about the Constitution. They wanted to learn more about how they can vote. It's these two components that are crucial that this bill does touch upon. And that is why we really do need to pass this bill. As James Madison said, a well-instructed people alone can be permanently a free people. This bill will create an educated citizenry where when they graduate, we can ensure we're putting forth citizens who are involved, thoughtful, and independent thinkers. I do implore you to please pass this bill, not for the students alone, but for the state as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm glad you continued your studies.
Thank you.
Good to see. Thank you very much for coming up
Thank
here.
you so much.
Elizabeth DeBril.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth DeBrule. I'm representing the New Hampshire Historical Society, which if you haven't visited before, it's that giant granite building right out the window.
No excuse now.
Well, I'm very conscious not repeating any of what's been said before, so I'm going to try and keep this very brief. The New Hampshire Historical Society has existed for 200 years. It's our 200th anniversary this year, as a matter of fact. We're one of the oldest nonprofits in the state. We've had educational programs since 1964, and we routinely work with upwards of 15,000 New Hampshire students a year. It's very common for students to come and do the State House tour, and then they come over to the New Hampshire Historical Society and do a tour there. So we have a long history. We have a lot of kids we've seen over a lot of years. It's allowed us to track trends, notice changes. And we did see some really big changes in the 2010s. They were very quick, very dramatic. We were all a little shocked at the drop in knowledge that the kids coming to see us had. We had to change our programs. We had to drop some programs. We used to do a program called New Hampshire at War. We had to drop it because it looked at New Hampshire's role in the American Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II. Kids no longer had heard of those wars. They couldn't put them in the correct chronological order, which required us to drop that program altogether. So we, in 2017, 2018, the Board of Trustees made a big investment, a big commitment to this issue. And we started an initiative called the Democracy Project. We've spent since then about $1.5 million on this specific issue, social studies in New Hampshire schools. We did a statewide survey, a listening tour, and gathered a lot of information. New Hampshire is not unique in this. Nationwide, we're seeing this trend all over. What we found was that as much attention is paid at the high school level, the crisis is really at elementary and middle school. When we talked to educators around the state, we found that since No Child Left Behind was passed in 2003, that there had been a really serious decline in how much time and resources were being spent on these issues at the elementary and middle school level. It had all gotten crowded out by high stakes testing in reading and math. Science gradually managed to claw its way back in there. They had some really big funding that helped them do it. They have this sort of idea that parents think science is going to help you get a job and that you don't really need history and civics. And I think the combination has just managed to marginalize social studies to just a remarkable degree. We found that in most New Hampshire elementary schools, almost no social studies was being taught at all. Teachers were trying to work it in when they could, but as time went on, as you yourself mentioned, Senator, you now have generations of teachers who did not receive that education themselves. And without state support, without school support, without resources, they were being challenged to teach in it. At the same time all this was happening, the similar shift was happening in the DOE, right? They have to respond to what the federal laws are requiring them to do. We stopped testing in social studies in the early 2000s. Early 2010s, the DOE dropped the social studies liaison position, which, by the way, I believe is the only position that was funded through state funds. The reading specialists, math specialists, and science specialists are all funded by federal funds. Because the social studies position was funded by the state in 2013, I'm sure you guys remember, it was pretty tough years back then. There were a lot of budget cuts, and that position got cut. There are no current academic social studies standards. The last time those were revised were in 2006. The DOE worked on those in 2018 and 2019. Several of us in this room were actually on that committee working on those standards. It has, as I understand it, been indefinitely tabled. So there is a general lack of support for social studies education. A lot of nonprofits have stepped into the breach. My organization, New Hampshire Civics, many of my partners, colleagues who are here in the room and looking to testify, we have stepped up and provided a lot of support for social studies education to do what we could. It's a classic New Hampshire private-public partnership, and we're starting to see some good results. But there are some changes that need to be made, and this bill reflects that. So the provision that I'm most interested in, that I'm most concerned about, or I'm most in favor of, is the idea of changing that wording regarding when social studies education should begin. The current bill says no later than 8th grade. That actually contradicts what's in the minimum standards that the state has already passed, which says it should be taught at every grade level. I think it's caused confusion with when you add it in with all the other lack of support, demands on time. I think it's just muddied the waters to a great deal, and I think it should be clarified. I have to say, when we talked to educators around the state, they were just as concerned about this problem as all of us. And they need resources, they need support, they need ways to work it in to their school days. And I think that in many ways, like I said, that public-private partnership will continue. And I think we can really meet a lot of those needs. I do want to mention, just in response to one thing, part of the New Hampshire Historical Society's commitment is we created a new statewide social studies curriculum for elementary students. It is a content-based curriculum. It is full of facts, of information, of contextual knowledge, of ideas, and it is available to everyone in the state for free. You can look at it online. Everybody can look at it. It's open access, no accounts, no passwords, nothing. It's if you go to the New Hampshire Historical Society's website, there's a link to it. It's called Moose on the Loose. And no other state in the country has anything like this. So in addition to that, we have a number of wonderful programs that have been created by groups like New Hampshire Civics and Civics 101 that really, when we put them all together, we have the foundation there for schools to use. That's already created. They're all free. We all provide free teacher training. So we have really tried to remove obstacles from helping elementary schools incorporate more social studies, history, civics into their curriculum. So I think I'll wrap it up there. I've probably already said too much, but I do really want to emphasize the need to clarify the language and make sure that schools know that the state believes it's a priority to be teaching history and civics at every grade level, which is already, like I said, in the minimum standards.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Thank you very much. Kathleen Egbert at the last word part of it. And again, please, if you have anything in additional to say, that would be great.
Okay. Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Kathy Cuddy Egbert. I'm a recently retired superintendent, currently an education consultant, member of the New Hampshire Civics Coalition, member of the New Hampshire Association of School Administrators, and a parent of 2 girls. I'm here to testify in support of SB 216. Although I'm testifying on my own behalf, I also want you to convey to you that the leadership of NHSAA is supportive of the concept behind SB 216. Associate Director Jerry Frew could not be here today, but intends to submit written testimony. The fact that children in the United States attend schools across the country and have a right to a free public education has everything to do with civics. In fact, this right was founded on the premise that our form of government requires an educated citizenry in order to participate fully and self-govern successfully. The primary purpose behind the founding of public education was to educate children of all walks of life together to develop some common knowledge, understandings, and primarily citizenship. In recent years, as you've heard from others, math, literacy, and science have been the primary focus in school. Unfortunately, high-stakes testing has intensified this focus. The result has been less time and attention devoted to civics. Educating students in math, literacy, and science is certainly necessary for an educated citizenry, but is certainly not sufficient. Several reports, with the Brown Center Report on American Education in 2018 among them, find that while math and reading skills have improved, there's not been a commensurate increase in civics knowledge. One of the most important features of SB 216 is that it elevates the importance of civics education. With the decrease in attention to social studies and civics, there has been an increase in incivility in our public discourse. Political polarization has made it increasingly difficult for our government to forge a consensus about how to address our country's many challenges. This is our evidence that students need to learn that conflict is an inherent part of democracy and that we must help them develop the ability to weigh evidence, to analyze primary sources, to understand conflicting perspectives, to make evidence-based arguments, and especially to demonstrate respect for complexity, differing perspectives, and engage in respectful dialogue. As with math, literacy, and science, civics education needs to begin early. I know you've heard this in other testimony. Teachers begin civics in kindergarten with activities such as classroom morning meetings, lessons about people in the neighborhood and helpers in the community, and student responsibilities in the classroom as members of the classroom community. While teachers are incorporating civics now, more support for civics education will promote the incorporation of civics in a more intentional and developmentally sequenced manner, kindergarten through grade 12. There is one portion of SB 216 that I'm unable to support, and that is the development of a formal commission. The Civics Coalition conceived of a group similar to the coalition itself for the purpose of designing professional development for teachers, curating and developing resources, accessing the funds for the cost of these resources, and monitoring the implementation and needs of district schools and teachers. The Commission recommended in SB 216, and as I understand the membership requirements given the legislation, would not be the proper group to provide this type of support. In summary, civics education is critical in order for our children to have the tools necessary to sustain our democracy. I hope that you'll support this bill and that civics education regains its proper place in our schools. I don't think it's too dramatic to say that our government depends on it, our democracy.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and
Any
consideration
questions?
of my testimony.
Good, good, good.
And I do have copies if do you have any questions?
I don't see anyone.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Andrea Cameron. And I'm getting to the point you really have to keep the testimony down to 3 minutes. If
Nothing
you have it written,
prepared.
we'll take a
I
copy.
am a retired New Hampshire elementary school teacher. I
Okay.
taught for over 20 years, the last 16 in Canterbury. And I would just be repeating what everyone else said. It needs to start early. However, I believe it does. It starts with all we learned in kindergarten is all we ever knew, to be kind to one another and how to talk to one another. And somehow we lose that along the way. Our country was founded on the principles of freedom and democracy, and we need to teach these to our children, not just in kindergarten, but in every year. As an elementary school teacher, perhaps it's easier to teach it. There are lots of resources out there, and they've been growing. I will tell you, if you want to see a wonderful experience, go to the State House and see Virginia Berry lead a group on a tour. Go over to the New Hampshire Museum. Go to the Supreme Court. Everyone is willing to teach our kids. However, high stakes testing has taken away. We test in reading, we test in math, sometimes in science, never in social studies.
people that come to this country as immigrants have to take a test to pass for U.S. citizens, but we don't. They probably know more about being a U.S. citizen than we do. I support this bill as a first step to get us back on track. Something has to be done, to quote a line in a play called We're Writing the Constitution, that we do every year in Canterbury with our kids. Something has to be done. New Hampshire is a unique legislative body, in that you are from the people, and we need to get back to that. So I hope that you'll consider that. I'm open for questions, but like I said, everything has been said before me.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Green.
Morning. For the record, Dr. Nate Green, I'm with the New Hampshire Department of Education. Neither supporting nor opposing the bill. I do have a couple of potential technical corrections to some of the language, and then the department has received some questions over the course of the past 2 school years, I would say, just regarding some of the language that's within the bill. And so just maybe looking for some clarity in terms of the implementation of that. So the first one that I want to point out, just in the first paragraph here, throughout most of New Hampshire statute, when we talk about private schools, we actually don't refer to them as private schools. We call them non-public schools. All the rulemaking authority under the State Board of Education refers to non-public schools, and we have rules specific to that. But this particular statute refers to private schools. So I would just recommend that we change the wording from private to non-public in that case, and that just makes it match other statutes as well as the Department of Education regulations. So in paragraph 1 and paragraph 1A, it refers to both public and private schools as being beholden to these particular statutes. When we get to the section where we talk about the citizenship test requirements, there have been some questions around whether or not that also still applies to both public and non-public schools within the state. Because they're both called out in paragraph 1, in paragraph 2, we talk about those requirements, but it just uses the word schools. And we generally have graduation requirements that are applicable to public schools, but for the most part, non-public schools in the state have set their own graduation requirements. So this would be a unique section here that, because it doesn't immediately call out non-public schools in paragraph 2, but it does in paragraph 1, we just want to make sure the intent of the legislation is that they are included, or if the intent is that they're not, we call that out. And I think that's a little bit unclear with the wording here. And then when you get to the end of paragraph 2, specifically when it talks about data collection, it refers to school districts submitting data. School districts would seem to imply just public schools as opposed to non-public schools. So if there is an intent that this applies to both public and private schools, do we want data from both of those 2 types of schools, or do we only want to collect data from public school districts? So just a little bit of clarity, I think, in that paragraph will help the department in terms of implementing the legislation.
I'm sorry, could you repeat what paragraph that section was in?
Paragraph 2, and that's at the bottom of page 2 is where that starts. And I believe at the end of paragraph 2 is where it refers to school districts. So by June 30th of each year, each school district shall submit the results. You're welcome. And that's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll have that reported, right, Pete? That's good. I have one more person who likes to testify, and I have to apologize. I cannot even begin to pronounce the last name. And if you can keep your testimony as brief as you possibly can, we would appreciate it.
Sure.
What is your first name?
Fisto.
Fisto? Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of committee. My name is Fiston Deshimie. I'm the grassroots organizer for AFSC, American Friends Service Committee, and a lead organizer for Change for Concord. I live here in Concord. And I have participated in the second Civics Academy. In the Concord Civics Academy, my second year when I came to the United States 6 years ago. And this was prepared by Chen for Concord and AFC with the city of Concord. And being here, it's part of my civics academy. Recently, I was invited to schools. I usually speak to students, and I was invited to Broken Ground and speaking to students. There were a lot of young people, and there's a lot of questions. They ask a lot of questions. They don't believe that they can participate they don't believe that they can participate in the community, giving back to the community, or doing any community work, because they don't believe that that's something that they would benefit from, and they don't know why. They don't believe that they should, and they don't know the importance of that, because we don't have civics in schools. And here we're talking about next generation leadership. This is a bridge that would enable next generation leadership to accomplish their goals and to become better leaders and to correct the mistakes that our current leaders are making. And also, I believe that the fact that we have new people, this country is becoming more diverse. We have new Americans. We have new Americans in our community. And it's very important that we have that specific education in schools, because I too have experienced something, the lack of civics in schools, and I'm taking time to go through this and learn and understand, for me to be able to participate in the government or to give back to the community that believes in me, that has given me a chance when I came to the United States. So it's a little harder for me to accomplish what I needed to do for this country that is now my country. If I had that education in schools, then I should have been doing a lot of more things for the community. But I think that if we have that specific education in schools, young people from other countries, new Americans, are now going to struggle like the way they are, and students will be able to work together in schools, and maybe we would never experience lack of diversity in schools or discriminations we have. The fact that students are asking each other questions, they don't understand what's going on outside the schools, and the government is making a lot of changes that are affecting students. New Americans are struggling more because we don't understand the concept. It's a new language, it's so complicated. So it is very important that you make it easy and promote that and vote on this. And if we have that specific education in schools, then we can be able to accomplish more together, as in new Americans and Americans. I ask that you support this bill. Thank you. I will take questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee?
No questions, just a comment.
Thank
You
you.
want to make a comment?
Welcome to our country.
Thank you.
Now your country.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. Now, Dr. Khan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I know you've heard a lot of testimony on this bill, and I'll hit a couple of high points. You have letters from, I believe, two of my fellow board members. When I left the Senate, I joined the New Hampshire Civics Board. And a couple of the members that I call attention to, who I think gave you letters, are Steve Dupree and Chuck Douglas. You also have a letter from Susan Wallowitz.
We don't.
Huh?
We don't.
You don't have those?
I don't have it. Does anybody have those letters? Yeah.
Electronically?
But when? This morning? Okay. We'll get them.
Good.
We'll get them.
Good. It's fun to be on a board that's so nonpartisan and bipartisan. It really is. I've also been asked to serve on the coalition board, so that's been a rewarding experience. They meet by Zoom, by the way, so it's really easy to see the other 30 plus members when we do get together. The Susan Wallowitz letter, Susan's on the board, and Susan's an elementary teacher, and I want to call your attention to just a couple of things. She says, having children vote for their favorite color as a kindergartner and using that color for their work, having first graders vote on the book choice, third graders deciding whether math should be before lunch or after lunch, fourth graders putting Jack of Jack and the Beanstalk on trial and deciding whether he was guilty or innocent or who owns the beans, or I'm sorry, who owns the partial ownership and the benefits of the stock. Anyway, I mean, you get the idea. Here's an elementary teacher who's made the connections for her students that teaching civics includes teaching civil behavior, which encourages kindness and fairness in and outside the classroom to your fellow classmates. And she envisions this a curriculum that is this spiraling curriculum that has been described, that one that moves a student from a sense of self to a sense of belonging in a school, to a sense of belonging in a neighborhood in your town, to a sense of belonging in your state in fourth grade, where we see them come into the State House, to in fifth grade, a sense of belonging to your country. These are those developmentally appropriate ways for bringing students further along in their civics education through the elementary grades. I want to address, I think the content of the bill sells itself. Civics education from K through 8 is a deficiency. We need to correct it. We can correct it. This bill does that. It is the primary focus of this bill. The testimony from the Department of Education, Nate, I caught him, I got the specific reference, I'd be glad to pass them on to you. But those are sections that already exist. This is the issue of you open up a statute and you start to get some other kind of side things. No problem. Private schools can be called non-public schools. We can incorporate into the testing requirement that was passed in the last biennium. We can, you can add non-public schools to that section. Those are not what this bill was attempting to change. But some cleanup apparently the department feels would be helpful. I'm sure the committee can see its way to doing those. I want to address, though, the commission, because if you go on the website and look at the revised statutes of the state, and you try to find section RSA 1449, which is the bill that was, or the amendment offered last year, you can't find it. It's not there. I mean, it exists because the OLS is living by it. And specifically what 1449 enacted in 2022 does is it defines the composition of commissions and committees. And in order to comply with that statute, OLS needed to change the bill. And they did. And the way you know how bills came out this year, they were kind of late to the deadlines. And so when Martha Madsen, who testified earlier and is the chair of the New Hampshire Civics Coalition, when she contacted Representative Ladd about the legislation, which happened on January 7th, he said, this bill is going to have problems in the House. And why? And it's because of the new RSA on commissions and committees and what their composition needs to be. And so then the bill is now in Senator Carson's hands, and she's solicited such a broad range of support, which is wonderful, that now it is the matter of the commission has been changed, and we're just I have a lesson from Senator Bradley, my first term in the Senate, and he said, forget that issue, it's a sideshow. The commission has become a sideshow, and there is a capable body that can fulfill the role of the commission. It is the Civics Coalition. And so when it comes to the bill, whether you want this in an amendment, which we'd be glad, Madam Chair, to work with you to amend the bill if you want a formal amendment, or a committee amendment, however, I'll look to your guidance on this. But Section 3 of the bill is the commission. We would suggest that we delete Section 3 and delete Section 4, which is the repeal of the creation of the commission, and then we have a clean bill. It is specific to the content of civics education and assuring its teaching in elementary schools through the middle schools. And be glad to answer any questions that committee members have. And Madam Chair, please suggest today or as a follow-up, I can contact you and you can suggest how we
I've
proceed.
spoken with Senator Carson. She has no problem taking those two things out. So I think that's what we'll do. Any questions? Senator Lang, you've been waiting.
Yes, thank you. I was hoping, I saw him run out the door and I was afraid he wasn't going to come back. So my question is, and again, like I said, the original Bill 320 last year, and I was a co-sponsor of that bill, pushing the high school civics program through to make it a requirement for the testing. So in looking at that, in the view of that, the idea of that bill was knowledge. Right. And so we saw a severe lack of knowledge in what's coming out of our high schools in purposes of, I think someone testified, how many branches of government are there? Nobody didn't know. Right. And couldn't name them for sure. And so my concern and my part of my concern with this bill, even though I'm a co-sponsor of it, is civics versus civility and knowledge versus behaviors. Right, so we're kind of stepping into a new realm. Like the original bill was to talk about civics and knowledge, not to talk about civility and behaviors. And now we're kind of watering this down a little bit by adding behavioral language in here about how you behave as the language around, which I don't disagree with. But I'm concerned about we're watering civics down when we talk about, the values such as appreciation for free speech, civil discourse, and understanding the perspectives and experience and backgrounds that differ from our own, right? So that's kind of a logic and rhetoric conversation, not necessarily a civics government conversation. And so I guess I'm just looking for your input. Again, the idea around the original civics bill was teaching civics and knowledge, not civility and behaviors.
I'll go back to the elementary school example. You don't always win. And how do you behave when you don't? And I'm going to be your classmate regardless of whether you like my color or you want to study math before noon or afternoon. we don't always win. And we need to understand that the civility part of democracy is accepting the outcomes and continuing to work with people who on that issue you might have differed with, but on another issue we might totally agree. And that's the nature of exercises in civics, comes with an acceptance of civility and some behaviors that we're still all part of it, and we still are working together to improve it, and that's an important foundational lesson.
Follow-up?
Well, again, I guess I'm going back to the original intent of the bill, which was knowledge, right? Is that, again, we're back to the basics of how many branches of government, which doesn't require a civility conversation or a behavioral conversation. You know, what's the role of government, right? What's the executive branch do? What's the legislative branch do? What's the judicial branch do? Again, doesn't involve necessarily civility or it's a knowledge-based, fact-based conversation, right? History is a knowledge-based, fact-based conversation, right? And so I'm concerned when we start adding words like behavior and trying to teach somebody how to, no, you have to agree with, I have to agree with my fellow senator over here, or over on this side, right? And that I have to at least understand that perspective, and running down that rabbit hole and taking up so much class time trying to get that aspect in, that we lose the fact that there are three branches of government and the roles of the three branches of government, which is what the interest was, which is what the purpose of the original bill was to teach basic knowledge. You know, what is the Declaration of Independence? What is the New Hampshire Constitution? What is the U.S. Constitution? How many amendments are there? That was the original conversation point around a civics bill. And now we're turning it into, no, you got to agree with your fellow human being, and or at least have compassion for your fellow human being. And I think that waters the conversation down. I love section 1A of this that says we're gonna expand this and make sure that in elementary, middle school, and high school, we're gonna talk about what government is and what happens in your role in government. But my concern again is this watered down, we start adding behavioral and civility conversations that can run us down a rabbit hole, and we lose the quality knowledge that's because we have to deal with this other aspect.
If I address that comment, I understand your concern. I'd also, we can acknowledge that federalism and a republic are in conflict with each other constantly. The founders found a way to resolve it in our country, but we need to understand that debate, right? And what states were on what side of it, who the actors were, how those actors came together and agreed on other aspects of our foundational papers. So I think this is there are parts to understanding our democracy and its frailty that are not just fact-driven, but in fact are understanding the different sides of a debate and how people come together to resolve the issues.
Thank you.
All set? Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, and be glad to work with you both on the wording changes
Okay.
that the department asked for and the deletion of
And
those
the deletion
paragraphs.
of that, yes, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody in the audience who has anything else to add in 30 seconds or less? Okay.
Thank you. I thought I had signed up to speak. I know I had signed in support of this, and I thought I had checked off speak. So if I didn't, I
thought I
apologize.
had heard you already.
You did. I know. I feel like I need a punch card today for my fourth time. I will keep this to 30 seconds. I promise. Still Megan Tuttle, president at NEA New Hampshire. But I'm also a mom of 3 boys, and I taught social studies in 8th grade for 18 years. So this bill is near and dear to my heart. And I do think, I will hand in my written testimony, but I agree with almost everything that's been said before me. There are a few things I didn't agree with. But just a few things, we bring our fourth graders to the State House every year to see government in action. My three boys don't realize how lucky they are that they get civics lessons every day they're with me. There's always something we're talking about, and they will eventually appreciate, everything I talk to them about. But, there's just so much there's just so many good reasons why this has to happen. We've heard so many reasons why it's not happening and how we can change this. There are some good things happening in the schools, obviously, but we need to be doing more. And that's why this bill is so crucial to passing. So again, as an eighth grade social studies teacher of 18 years, couldn't seem to get out of eighth grade. As a mom of three boys, one of them's going to be voting in the next election. He's just turned 16 on Halloween. And that was a big conversation that the next election we have, you're going to be voting in. So I want to make sure that they're, knowledgeable, aware, and critical thinkers of everything that's going on in the future. So we fully support this in all aspects. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Megan Tuttle? Being none.
Hopefully I'll see you. Oh, actually, I won't see you next week. I'm sorry. I'm going away for work, so I won't be here.
Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else? Okay, then this will conclude the Senate education hearing on these bills. Now we're going to have to go into executive session. Okay, do I have this motion?
I'll second it.
All those in favor of executive session? Aye. Okay. We have to take up 141.
Yeah, what are we thinking about executing today?
141. No.
So, Madam Chair? Madam Chair? Pass out the
I
amendment.
want
The amendment.
Auxiliaries. Who's auxiliary schools?
I have an amendment for 215, which is the associate's versus bachelor's degree bill. Yeah, nurse's bill. Yeah. So, thank you.
No, these are the ones that we did today.
Yep, you did.
But what is the number? 141. That's what I thought. Yeah, it is. It's 140. There you go. Yeah, 141. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay, 141.
Are you looking for a motion? We have a couple bills.
This is the Senator Altshuler's bill on having kids spend a year in public school before they are eligible for ETFs or whatever they are.
Madam Chair, I move ITL.
I second.
Senator Prentice.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward. I actually submitted to Senator Altshuler, the sponsor of this bill, an amendment to take the year out and just leave the means testing in for the financial eligibility. I have not heard back from her yet, because I'd like to present that. If it's the will of the committee to move, then, I'll vote the way I'm gonna vote, but I was bringing forward a second option. It just has not.
You know, 141. 141.
Yeah. And if I may add, I've spoken with my constituents, and although I'm a co-sponsor, I feel I don't agree with the part. I have really come to my position is I don't agree with the part on spending a year in school, but I do agree that just like all other public programs, that the eligibility around the financial part needs to be tested. So that's why I wanted to bring this amendment forward, but I didn't want to bring it forward without the okay of the prime sponsor. I wouldn't want anyone to amend my bill. And I'm sorry that I have not heard back from her. I put that in maybe yesterday or Sunday night. And I asked minority staff. So the will of the committee is to move forward, and you can move forward. I just want to let you know that I have made that ask.
Yes.
So even if the only thing we did was remove the 1 year, I would still be an ITL recommendation on this.
Okay.
I even with the financial considerations.
Okay. So we need to take a vote on the ITL and you have discussion. Do you want to, this is going to come up on the floor. This
Yeah,
bill. So do you, at that point, do you want to present
If I,
a modification or amendment?
if I can come to consensus with Senator Altshuler, then I, then I will present it on the
Okay,
floor.
okay.
And my
That's-
accountability
that's
positioning.
fair
Sure.
enough.
Happy to.
Okay, so I have an ITL on 141.
Second.
And Jandro seconded it. And the votes, how many votes for ITL? You're going to say no. Okay, and you will say no. So there's 3-2. I will take it out. So you have this as 3-2, take it out. Okay. And
You want to drive me crazy and Steve.
It's your
I have an amendment for 215 to fix the nursing bill.
right,
And the amendment was just passed out.
215.
yeah.
So Madam Chair, I'm going to move the adoption of amendment number 477S.
Okay. Second,
I would second that.
okay. Discussion on the amendment.
So Madam Chair, what I do is I went through and I ended up cleaning up that language in that law. We had this whole section in section 4 that says if then, if this, that, when. It was really confusing.
Okay.
And so what I ended up doing was I made it clear that an associate's level degree is the entry level for a school nurse. And then I set section 4 saying, however, if you're hired with an associate's level degree versus a bachelor's degree, that within 6 years, you must achieve your bachelor's of science in nursing.
Right.
So I cleaned up that whole statute in section 4 and section 1 where it talks about degree, and that's what the amendment does.
So.
And I spoke with the parties that brought it forward, and they were okay with the language.
Okay, so this really replaces the bill.
What's that?
This replaces.
Yes,
So this is not the bill,
this will now become the bill.
but, okay. Okay, so we have discussed the amendment. How do you vote?
Aye.
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 There's 5-0 on the amendment. Now what do we do with the bill that we're replacing?
I'm gonna move OTPA on the bill as amended.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, I'll be with the amendments. So that's 5-0. Do you want to take it out, Tim?
I will. And Madam Chair, I'll move consent.
Second it.
Consent? 1, 2, 3, 4. With the Senator Prentice, consent?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
5-0. Okay, I got that one. Where's this? Okay. Else.
Do you want, Madam Chair, do you want to discuss 152, which was the CTE bill, and also the workforce training bill?
152. Sure.
So there's an amendment to the bill put in by Senator Waters, which is 187, which I agree with. It adds a piece to the bill. This bill was, I'm from the Lakes region. I had a significant conversation with all the boating and marinas throughout the entire Lakes
yeah, right,
region,
right,
looking to add that marine program to the Wolfboro School to help with the workforce in that area, to give a training pathway for students in high school. And I highly support that. And the second half of this bill, which does the Workforce Development and Innovation Fund, again, looks to deal with the fact that we're going to be having a wind farm, it appears possibly out on the seacoast. And with that wind farm, there's going to be workers required and be able to encourage a workforce program at our community college systems and various educational opportunities out at the seacoast area. So I think that it only, if I remember right, there was only $1 or something like that put into the fund to establish it, and with the idea being that there would maybe some public-private partnerships that would allow money to go into that fund through donations to support those clean energy programs out in the seacoast. So I guess I would move first the adoption of Amendment 187 on Senate Bill
So
152.
the second one is adding the marine.
Yes. Well, New Hampshire Sea Grant.
What's the amendment
Yeah.
number?
187. That's not the one that I have here.
So 187 adds one more person, the representative from the University of New Hampshire, Sea Grant, appointed by the university.
I have 395.
All right, one more time, what was the amendment?
Sorry?
What was the amendment number?
187S. It is, again,
You
it
know, I
adds,
don't have
it adds to, I think he might have
Here it is.
given it out when
187,
he
yes,
presented
okay,
the bill. It adds to the commission one more member, the representative from the University System Sea Grant Program.
Okay. So we have two amendments to the bill.
I don't think I have the second amendment. Or, hold on, let me see if it's in my book. I don't have the second amendment.
187. Let's take 187 first, since it has a lower number. Any discussion on the
I'm
amendment?
sorry, there it is.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's 5-0 for that amendment.
Madam Chair,
Now-
I further move amendment number 385S.
395S. Any discussion on the amendment? Saying none? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, now look at the bill for the amendment.
Madam Chair, move OTPA
Yeah, what is that A?
as amended, as amended.
Oh.
Ought to pass as amended.
I think it's from the House.
It is a house. Sorry, that's a house thing.
But I believe it's correct.
You have to let people know you're not doing the original bill. It's been amended. They're doing the,
The password amendment.
But I believe it's correct verbiage. Which would be in the Senate as well.
Is it?
I believe so.
I just hear the Senate President's, all those in favor of the bill as amended.
Right.
We're
So,
lazy, is what we're
okay.
saying.
So O to P with the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0.
Madam Chair, move consent.
Favor? All those in
Aye.
favor? 5-0. Who wants to take it out?
I'll take it out.
Benton will take it out in case it comes to the discussion. Okay. Is that enough? 3 of them? Do you want to do one more? I had hoped we could do 216 or 316, but that's gonna need some changes to
Yeah,
it
we need
before we
more.
do anything. First responder. To bring it to those who hold this here. 133. I'm looking at 133.
I got 135. I don't see 133.
No, I'm looking, this is 153. Establishing a first responder career development, recruitment and retention program, making appropriation therefore.
153.
153. Can't remember what the bill was.
Madam Chair, just a conversation. So I guess I'm looking at some of these, all these various programs we're doing. We have the bill to establish recruitment of educators. Then we just had the bill we heard today, which establishes the loan payback program for educators. Then we got the paraprofessional bills. I mean, the early educator bill and recruitment and retention. I guess my concern is that we look at this as a big picture and not just keep bolting on something else to try to make it fix the
I
problem.
think
So
we should
how do
take
we
a
get
look
to
at
that?
all those bills together at one
Right.
point and just make a decision at that point. So we'll have 3 that we'll send
Okay.
to the floor.
Okay.
Okay, good.
It's a good idea.
Want to get out of executive session?
Not yet.
Oh, well, what?
So are we suggesting, or do I hear a suggestion that these are all like amended into one bill? Or do we want to look at them in one particular executive session and prepare for it that way? Like what's this, I don't disagree
Right,
with you. I mean, I
yeah.
hear how you've laid this out. I
Yeah.
couldn't exactly hear what Senator Ward said. What's the plan going forward?
Well, I was thinking that there are so many of them that are sort of similar in what they want to do. And if we had an executive session, a longer one, that we can all reread the bills, take a look at them and discuss them, maybe compare them to each other and see which ones we can support and which ones we can't. And if there's any way we can work with one or the other to either amendment or something.
Okay.
But you're right, there's several of them. There's appropriations and appropriations and
Sure, yeah.
appropriations.
And there's,
And I think we need to take a look at,
Well,
how much appropriation can we do?
And I'm also concerned about the idea of we make 15 changes. We don't know which one was the solution, right? And so the idea being, I believe in incrementalism and make a change. Let's see what the outcome is, make a change what the outcome is. We have, 3 different bills there that all address teachers, that all address recruitment and retention. And I'd like to take for lack of a better phrase, a baby step approach, right? To see how we can solve this and what it looks like. So I'm just concerned, again, we're doing a shotgun approach and hopefully something hits the target. So.
No, and I agree with that. I would say, we're facing a big problem and that, when you go into battle, you don't just attack one spot, you attack each and every spot. So I think, as long as we take a look at each and every bill and what they're addressing, I think maybe there is a concrete solution to something there.
Okay, do you have a vote to get out of executive session?
Move to end executive session.
Second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
We are done for today.
oh,
I gotta run over, we're meeting Senator D'Alessandro and Rosenwald in our office, so.
Yeah. Or
I
you are.
I
yeah.
am about gambling.
Oh.